This podcast is brought to you by the IIEA, sharing ideas, shaping policy.
Good afternoon, and I am very glad to welcome all of you joining us online to this IIEA webinar on the subject of the European Green Deal and its implications for the Global South. My name is Owen Lewis. I'm Professor Emeritus of Architectural Science at UCD and co-chair of the IIEA group on climate and energy. I'm delighted to be joined today by Dr. Joana Portugal Pereira. She's in Lisbon at the moment. She's assistant professor at the School of Engineering in the University of Lisboa. Dr. Portugal Pereira will speak to us about 20 minutes or so on her recent research, where she and colleagues used Brazil as a case study for exploring how the EU's carbon dioxide removal strategies may affect the environment, landscape, and communities in countries in the Global South. That term, carbon dioxide removal, you'll hear CDRs, and that's an important acronym to bear in mind this afternoon. Afterwards, after Dr. Portugal Pereira's remarks, we'll go to a Q&A. You can join the discussion using the Q&A function on Zoom, that rather than the chat function, please. So the Q&A function. And I would emphasize that feel free to send in your questions as they occur to you throughout the session, and we'll put them then once the presentation has concluded. And a reminder that today's presentation and the Q&A are both on the record. You should also feel free to join the discussion on Twitter using the handle @IIEA. Now, Dr. Portugal Pereira is assistant professor in the Mechanical Engineering Department at Instituto Superior Técnico in the University of Lisboa, and a research fellow at the Center for Innovation, Technology and Policy Research. She holds a PhD in urban engineering from the University of Tokyo, her primary degree from Lisboa. Dr. Portugal Pereira has made significant contributions to global environmental assessments. She served as a lead author for several influential UN reports, such as the IPCC Sixth Assessment Cycle, the UN Environment Programme's Seventh Global Environmental Outlook, and the UNEP Emissions Gap Report. Her expertise lies in energy and land-based innovations for environmental mitigation and climate change adaptation. It's over to you, Joana. We look forward to your presentation. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Owen, and IIEA for the kind invitation, and everyone who is listening us online. So with no further ado, I will start by sharing my screen. I just need to double check that you can see it properly. Yeah.
It's very good. Yep.
Okay, lovely. With no further ado, I will start. So thank you very much for the kind invitation. My name is Joana Portugal Pereira. I'm currently at University of Lisbon, where in the past I spent nearly 10 years at University Federal of Rio de Janeiro, where I work with colleagues from there looking at mitigation strategies and evaluating climate policies and interference with other ecosystem services. So what I would like to guide you through you today is actually to go through the context and motivation of our study, reinforcing the objectives and the hypotheses that we considered, followed by how we developed the study and what kind of scenarios we evaluate, followed by key message and results. So what are the implications for ecosystem services in Brazil if we steadily increase a large amount of land to use to capture and sequestrate carbon, and what are these implications for Brazil's own climate goals, followed by policy recommendations and final takeaways. So before we start, why this matter is relevant. In IPCC Sixth Assessment Report, the Working Group 3 on mitigation evaluated more than 1,000 mitigation pathways, and they were all consistent with these three sentences that I highlight here. Firstly, if we want to stabilize global warming to 1.5 degrees Celsius by the end of the century, we need to reach net zero carbon dioxide emissions by mid-century. If we want to reach a global warming level of well below 2 degrees, we have a bit more time, but it's still very challenging to reach net zero carbon dioxide emissions by the second half of the century, around 2070. And all this involves a rapid, a deep, and far-reaching reduction of greenhouse gases in all economic sectors. But we do know that we have what we call the hard to electrify or hard to abate or hard to decarbonize sectors that are more challenging to decarbonize, and currently we don't have cost-effective or technology to do so. I'm particularly thinking about aviation, shipping, agriculture, heavy industry, among others. So and what I show you here in the figure on the right-hand side is a key summary of the different mitigation pathways assessed by IPCC, where we see what we call the residual emissions as a bar, and we see in green and orange the emissions that would need to be negative to counterbalance the positive emissions of these hard to abate sectors. So why it matters? Carbon dioxide removal, the acronym of CDR, I may use it a couple of times here. They are strategies that exactly allow to balance these residual emissions from sectors that are extremely difficult to decarbonize. On the right-hand side, I show you a diagram with different types of strategies of CDR, and ones that are more well-known and better modeled by climate scenarios are actually land-based CDRs that required significant amounts of land, especially in countries where we have very high productivity of biomass and land available, which means away from Europe, where we had challenge in terms of land availability. And this may and probably will affect local people, and these impacts are yet to be evaluated. Within European Union, I may very quickly go through this because you probably know it better than I do. In Europe, through the Green Deal, we are legally binded to reach a climate neutrality stage by 2050. And we have sub-targets in 2030 and 2040 that require steady reduction of emissions. However, we also know that current policies in the European Union are insufficient across all sectors, such as agriculture, building, forestries, to reach this goal in 2050. On the top of this, unfortunately, we have been observing some rollback policies and some weakness of environmental laws that may even more constrain these long-term goals. Furthermore, we already observe significant climate feedbacks that may and will constrain the European Union capacity to sequestrate land-based carbon. I'm specifically thinking about global warming, heat waves, and extreme waves that increase the risk of wildfires. Therefore, we currently observe in the European Union a decline of our capacity to sequestrate carbon through our land. Why we focus on Brazil? There's good reasons to do so, probably more than 7. But here I would like to highlight that Brazil, as the tropical song says, is a paradise blessed by nature. We have a high potential of land-based carbon sinks. We have a long history in bioenergy commodities exporter. We are the larger exporter of ethanol, biodiesel, and all the industry related to bio-based business is very well developed in the country. Brazil and the European Union, they hold very tight relationships despite the current geopolitical instability. So this telecoupled relationship between European Union and Brazil deserves further research and analysis. So this brings me to the research question that we considered here. So we aim to evaluate the complexity interactions between European Union and Brazilian climate policy and evaluate what would be the implications if European Union demand for carbon removal would to be aligned with the Brazilian expansion of land. We examine these dynamics between European Union bioenergy carbon dioxide removal demands and Brazil's own climate and energy goals. And furthermore, we explore the social environment impacts that may occur in the country. And we identify several blind spots and potential risks relying on this large-scale expansion of land-based offsets beyond European borders. How did we do it? So we followed five-step framework. Firstly, we start by designing an European climate policy scenario. So we review the current mitigation pathways aligned with climate goals. And then we implemented a risk assessment to say what would be the gap between the current pledges and the implemented results overend. So by that, we estimate the required remove carbon dioxide yearly if we are to meet our climate goal here within European Union. Secondly, we evaluate what this required removal carbon dioxide would mean in terms of land availability if we were considering infrastructure of carbon dioxide removal and storage aligned with bioenergy plants. So after having the amount of hectares required and where likely this would happen, we evaluate local environmental impacts considering potential conflicts of land use, food competition, and other ecosystem services. We considered social impacts for local people and indigenous communities, and at the end, we draw policy recommendations both for the European Union and Brazil. So in terms of the scenario design, we considered two different criteria or axes that got us to 6 counterfactual scenarios overall. So in the axis, the horizontal axis, we evaluate the risks in European Union fulfilling the climate mitigation strategies as low and high to Brazil. While within the context of Brazilian policy, here showed in the vertical axis, we considered a weak climate governance, a governance aligned with the current policies of full implementation of the forest code that details and constrains illegal deforestation in the country. And the third one, a scenario that is aligned with climate neutrality goals of the country. So in terms of land demand, as you can see here in these two figures, the figure on the left-hand side shows the cumulative land required in dark blue with a high risk hypothesis, with the light blue with a lower risk. And while on the right-hand side, you may see the cumulative carbon dioxide removed based on CDR. So we are talking in the low risk scenario by 2050, an amount of 14 million tons of carbon dioxide, which should probably be equivalent to 1,000 million hectares. While in the high risk, we are discussing and talking about a cumulative removal of nearly 23 gigatons of CO2 in the same period up to 2050. That would require about 152 million hectares in the country. Just to put these large numbers in context, we run a land spatial explicitly model. One of my co-authors did this task, and we evaluate the weak climate governments and the climate neutrality governments and what would be the best allocation of land used in the country. So for 2050, Brazil project land availability for cropland is about 73 to 84 million hectares. And if we think about non-productive land, mainly degraded pasture and abandoned degraded land, this would be about 30 to 71 million hectares, together with low intensity pasture lands of about 40 to 99 million hectares. But all these numbers, even considering non-productive land or less intensive pastures, would be a lower value compared to the numbers that we estimate they may occur in future. And on the top of this, if low productivity land is to be used to counterbalance carbon dioxide emissions from European Union, this would probably compromise the own Brazilian capacity to fulfill its climate neutrality goals, because part of this non-productive land is being considered available to fulfill the Brazilian climate neutrality plans. So what could go actually wrong? Currently, Brazil has a weak procedural and recognized safeguards for land use and land tenure for historical reasons, and repeatedly episodes of inequality have happened. Historically, we do know, and there's evidence that many of the supposedly green projects are actually bypassed by local people, and they actually reinforce inequality and unfair trades of land and local conditions for local communities. So decisions making based on a top-down approach, they actually reinforce this kind of inequalities. We also observe in the past that traditional land rights are often not recognized. So many of the land that supposedly is degraded and has no use, actually it's used by local peoples in informal economies that do not show in statistics and are not recognized based on office far away in capitals. And on the top of that, current local institutions, they lack on strong technical capacity, especially resources and autonomy to reinforce safeguards to ensure rights to local people. So we've raised these constraints and risks that may fall us into the predatory green projects that we had observed in the past in the country. In terms of implications to Brazil's climate goals, we conclude that without a robust governance and concrete justice safeguards, carbon dioxide removals could actually undermine rather than advance Brazilian climate and social goals. If we do not implement a strong monitoring and report and verification system, we actually have the risk of double counting carbon dioxide removals, meaning that the same carbon dioxide removed would be a double account for climate goals in Brazil and European goals. So there's potentially distortions in carbon credits markets if we do not implement a strong monitoring and verification system. Lastly, several projects that happened in the past and may happen in future, they actually weaken the public trust and the political acceptance, constraining potential acceptance on large-scale carbon dioxide deployments, and will just reinforce the current inequality that persists in the country. In terms of policy recommendations, we highlight 6 strategic points. Firstly, to adopt a consumption-based accounting to reflect the real carbon emissions and carbon footprints and land use impacts of our imports, implement market-based incentives such as the carbon border adjustment mechanism that seems to be a bit delayed in implementation, avoid strongly large-scale bioenergy with capture and storage deployments until host countries, in this case Brazil, implement safeguards to ensure ecosystem services protection. It's also very important to implement strong monitoring and reporting and verification systems to ensure we are not double counting carbon dioxide savings, and include social and environmental safeguards such as participatory planning and highlight indicators to stress and evaluate the sustainability of ecosystems and social indicators. In terms of Brazilian policies, we recommend the country ensures that potential future CDRs projects respect local communities and generate long-term benefits to the locals. This could be done by, for instance, promoting already existing systems such as payments for ecosystem services, monitoring systems, and reinforce forest protection laws and align this with local domestic policies. In terms of joint European Union and Brazil actions, we actually highlight the need of having participatory frameworks at multi-governance level, able to ensure sustainability and traceability of the standards in trade agreements. This is particularly relevant in the context that the Mercosur European Union trade agreement is nearly completed and soon will be taken into force. We also recommend the co-development of regulations and certifications at a wider scale to ensure that we both can achieve social justice goals aligned with our climate neutrality goal, meaning that we avoid potential burdens and externalities that may undermine these goals of equity and climate. So in my last minutes, final takeaway, we've seen that carbon dioxide removal based on large-scale land projects would require significant amounts of land, and if that land to offset emissions is to be placed in a host country such as Brazil, that puts in risk environmental ecosystems and social rights. the implications for climate goals are also be threatened if we considered double counting of carbon removals. So we suggest and we recommend that both countries must ensure procedural justice and local-led governance to ensure local people are not forgotten in the process and they actually get benefits from the overall large-scale projects. So if you have any insomnia, and this is the bedside reading that I suggest, the research paper that we published and the book chapter exactly based on our analysis. And this study wouldn't be possible without funding from European Union and the UKRI, and my dear co-authors, Aline, Antonella, and Jasper, who embraced this study with me. We are a multidisciplinary team. I'm an engineer by profession, Aline a mathematician, and Antonella and Jasper from social science. So this would not be possible without them. So thank you very much, and I'm looking forward to hear your comments and questions.
This podcast is brought to you by the IIEA, sharing ideas, shaping policy.